Simon's outro. Okay, great. All right, now I need to go back here. We will go back to the red cards. Wild Ride. All right. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next part of the Tarkir Dragonstorm Limited Set Review. Today we're going to be looking at the red cards. I think it has been a wild ride so far. And so, we'll just hop into it with our first card, Wild Ride. See what I did there? That was good, wasn't it?
It was.
This is 1 red for a sorcery. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. And then it has Harmonize. We'll read it one more time for the class. You may cast a spell from your graveyard for its Harmonize cost. You may tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by X, where X is its power, and then you exile it. I think this card is borderline unplayable, is my instinct. Giving something with Mobilize Haste, there's a chance that it ends up being, enough damage that it helps, decks close out, but I doubt that that's true. The Harmonize, the +3/+0, and giving something haste is a useful ability, but when you have to tap a creature to do it, that's, kind of uninstinctual for the way the card works. My guess is this is probably pretty close to unplayable. I have it around a 9. How do you feel?
I agree. Tapping a creature to give another creature +3/+0 in haste is just so weird. I maybe there's a hyper aggressive deck in Jeskai space with Flurry that might play this. I'm really stretching. I think this might be my first 10. I just cannot see needing to pick this in a draft beyond just wheeling it and taking it for free. And even then, I rarely, if ever, will end up playing it. So I think this is my first 10. I'm going to give it a 10.
Yeah, I can agree with you. I'm gonna give it a 10. It's the first one. Do not draft it. You will not be in for a very fun ride. It will just be wild.
Wild but bad. So next card is Shock Brigade. 1 in a red for a 1/3 with Menace and Mobilize 1. This is your 2-drop Mobilize Enabler at common. Pretty strong, I would say. Menace is really nice for this not getting blocked super easily, and it's not amazing on its own. It kind of attacks for 2, but it sort of doesn't because it's pretty easy for them to just block the warrior when it's attacking. But we've just seen a lot of cards that really like to play with Mobilize, and I think this is exactly how you enable those. So I'm probably going to put this at somewhere like 6. I think it's going to be a common that you actively want.
Yeah, I agree. I want to put it above most of the commons that we have at 7, 8. I think 6 is a good place for this one. All right, next we have the Devoted Duelist, not to be confused with the Duelist of the Mind. Although, I don't know, Nathan can tell me. Maybe this is kind of like Nathan.
This is just Nathan when he's a little bit angry.
I was gonna say that's pretty good, but I don't think I've seen Nathan angry.
No, me neither. So it's only in theory. It's an artist's depiction of the idea.
Yes. The AI version of Nathan angry. All right, this is 2 mana for a 2/1 with haste. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. I think, unlike Nathan, this card is pretty bad.
Yeah, I agree.
A 2/1, you don't want to need to do other things. 1 damage is not really a great payoff. There's a fair amount of good blockers for this in the set. I think this card is. I'm also going to put this card at a 10.
I don't think I'd give it a 10 just because 2/1 haste is a reasonable-ish aggressive body, but I'm not going to go that much higher. I'll put it at a 9. You'll sometimes play it, but you really don't want to.
All right, well, you don't want this guy attacking you for giving him a 10, so I'll go with a 9 too.
Next card, Jeskai Devotee, 1 in a red for a 2/2. It's got Flurry. When you flurry, when you cast your second spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and then it fixes for Jeskai colors. I like it. The body on its own is not great, but I think it's a hard card to block, so it'll be able to get in some damage a good amount of the time. And then Jeskai seems to be not as aggressive as Mardu. Like it's not the mobilized deck, but it's probably the second type of aggro deck in the format, this flurry deck that we've been talking about. And fixing colors is nice, but I don't think this is quite as good as the more defensively slanted devotees. So, yeah, I don't know. I think like you'll need to take some amount of these just to fix well in your red decks, but um, I'd probably put it at like a six, maybe a seven, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think 6.5 sounds good to me. It's all right. I'm gonna give it a six because I gave the other one a six. The we haven't seen the fixing lands and stuff yet, but we're talking about something that looks like a pretty strong three color format, and this is one of the things that is going to help you play three colors, and so it's got that at base, and it's a totally serviceable thing otherwise. All right, now we have Fire Rim Form. This is 2 mana for an enchantment with flash. When this aura enters, enchanted creature gains first strike until end of turn. An enchanted creature gets +2/+0. So this is their like first strike trick of the set, but it's on an enchantment, and instead of it being +3/+0, it's +2/+0. The first strike cards are like normally fine. Maybe like a little bit better because of the mobilized cards this time around. Like you might want to be able to attack with a mobilized creature, and if you can, bring this in and give it first strike and let it live, that seems like a pretty strong play pattern. But these are never things you have to pick very highly. Typically, they come around. They're chicks. They require creatures. They're like just fine. So I think I'd probably put this around an 8.
This art is scary. That's my
It is
only
kind of scary.
contribution. Um, yeah, exactly everything you said. Like, it's fine. It's a combat trick. It sticks around, but it's slightly worse than the normal combat trick that you would get with this mana cost. And, like, those are never that good anyway. So, yeah, I'm good with an 8.
I'm looking at it now. Is this guy's foot, or is this guy fire breathing on this guy? What's happening here?
I'm pretty sure it's his, like, leg or foot. But his expression is the part that's scary to me. He's, like,
It's
really
like this
intense.
great.
Anyway, the next card is Molten Exhale. One in a red for a sorcery. You may cast it as though it had flash if you behold a dragon, and then it deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So I like this card. I mean, 2 mana, 4 damage is like pretty good removal and limited, and then sometimes you'll be able to cast it at instant speed, which is super nice. Uh, yeah, it's just like really good. It's good removal.
Yeah,
I'd give it a 3 probably.
yep, 3. I think 3 is like kind of our soft spot for solid removal, not like crazy above rate or anything. And I think this is exactly that.
Cool.
All right, now we have Twin Bolt. This is 2 mana instant. It deals 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. 2 damage is typically not enough damage in limited to main deck cards like this. I think most of the time they end up being sideboard cards, especially like I think Magic over the last like years adapted to a lot of like 3 toughness creatures. In this set, there's been a decent amount of 1 or 2 toughness creatures, so I could see like 2 mana shock being okay. But I mean, if you think about how many things shock played or how many things shock did, like this is 2 mana to shock, and it's not often going to kill 2 things. So I think I value this card pretty low. An 8. There's a chance it could be a 7 if like it ends up being an okay removal spell, but I definitely don't think it's something you're ever taking highly.
I really agree. Yeah, with everything you're saying. Like, this just isn't really a full removal spell, and the ability to split the damage is going to be pretty rare that it comes up. And sure, you can hit their face, but like it's just so much more expensive than shock. And I think a lot of the mobilized creatures, like the aggressive creatures in this format, have high toughness because they're making these like 1/1 tokens when they attack, and they're sort of designed to be able to survive the attack. So this card's not terrible, but like I think it's going to be worse than your average common. Probably, I'm putting it at like an 8. I think.
Yeah, I agree. All
All right,
right.
we've got Underfoot Underdogs, 2 in a red for a 1/2 goblin, and when it enters, you make a 1/1 goblin. So 2 goblins for the price of one, and it has 1 tap. Target creature you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. This card's interesting. It's kind of overcosted, I would say, for the bodies you're getting. It's part of the like go wide space, but it also like there. I don't think there are a lot of two power creatures that you really want to get in this format. It feels like there's like one power things with like mobilize and that kind of thing, and 3 mana is more than we're used to paying for that like unblockable effect on this kind of body. I think normally that we get that on like our typical aggressive 2 drop. It's hard for me to justify playing this, I think, as like my 3 drop spot in an aggressive deck. Maybe I'm underestimating it, but I don't know. I'm not that excited. What about you?
I think I'm a little higher on it than you are. Um, two bodies, it's 2/3 worth of power toughness for 3 mana, which I think is fine. I think being able to make one of your power 2 or less creatures that, has mobilize unable to be blocked can be really good for like an aggressive turn. I'm thinking like, we've got Frontline Rush, where this makes 2 creatures, and then the following turn you can make one of them unblockable, attack with all of them, and then you can also Frontline Rush. I think this card is definitely going to be a serviceable common. If not, I could see it being something pretty valuable in these decks. So I'm closer to a 7, and I think I kind of like it in that space.
Can you remind me what Frontline Rush is again?
It's the 1 white, 1 red multicolor card that gives
Oh
+X
yeah,
+X for cards attacking or makes goblins.
got it. Okay. Yeah, this kind of guarantees that getting in. That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and then
still
lets
think
you
I'm more
mobilize
like
a
an 8
attack.
on it.
I think it's definitely interesting. All right, so
Yeah,
now we have Rescue Leopard. This is such a cute card.
it
3 mana
is.
for a 4/2. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Um, it's a 4/2, so like it is a decently aggressive attacker. That being said, I don't think I can go any higher than 8 on something with 2 toughness. When it attacks, you do get to discard and then draw, but it's very rarely, I think, going to be able to attack in a way where you're not concerned it's going to trade down. So I think I'm unexcited about this card, but it's playable. Probably an 8.
Yeah, I think the thing this is supposed to be doing is like harmonize, because you like tap it to cast the harmonize spell and you discard your next harmonize spell.
Oh, I
But
see.
like that's pretty finicky. And like the body's fine, but it's definitely not exciting. I don't think it's a great blocker. Like, yeah, I think this is at best if you're really like enabling it like an average common. So I think 8 is perfect for it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
I
never
didn't
going to
think
be
about the
great. You never need to
harmonized thing,
prioritize.
but
That's like
I
the
don't think it
joke,
changes
I
too
guess,
much.
but I'm not laughing that hard at the joke, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so seize opportunity. 2 in a red for an instant. You can choose one. Exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards, or up to 2 target creatures each get +2/+1 until end of turn. This is pretty sweet. Like it's kind of close to a divination, I would say. Most of the time, if you're casting this for 3 mana, you're going to be able to use both of the cards. They might be a little bit more awkward than if they just went to your hand, but like you'll be able to get 2 cards out of this a lot. Ask me how I know, playing questing druid and gruel and standard.
Hmm.
And then the like combat trick option is also like pretty good. Like sometimes you'll get a card and a half out of it. Sometimes you'll even get 2 cards out of it. Uh, I like this card. It's nothing great. Like it's probably just an average common for me. I'd probably give it like a 7.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it's interesting. I think blocking the mobilized tokens, the mechanic makes it feel like blocking them will be like decently free because they're 1/1s and they sacrifice. But there really is like a fair amount of these combat tricks that are stapled onto cards that do other things. So I think we might end up finding that blocking the mobilized tokens is not so free.
Yeah, I agree. It's not going to be free even psychologically a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then like I think it will be correct to sort of force them to have it a lot, but you will get got sometimes. And if you have a really
Mhm.
valuable card, like don't just throw it in front of the mobilized token and be like, it's fine. It's probably not fine. There's a lot of ways they can punish you.
Yeah, and it definitely gives like some benefit to drafting cards like this because, you know, the first effect is not bad, but the second effect is when you get them, and because they're both
Yeah,
stapled onto one card, I think it goes up in value a little bit.
exactly.
All right, we got a Yeti. Summit Intimidator. I'm intimidated. 4 mana for a 4/3 with reach. When this creature enters, target creature can't block this turn. I am no longer intimidated. This card's fine.
It's
Like
fine.
sometimes your red cards need to have reach on them, or you will die to flyers. Just like the way the color pairs often end up. I don't think I want to like actively seek out this card. I don't think I would give it quite a 9 because the cards we've given 9s have been pretty bad. But I honestly, it doesn't feel good enough to give an 8. I'm gonna give it a solid 8.5.
Okay. I'm a little higher on this. I think like the ability can push through an attack and the reach is kind of nice and the body's not that bad. I think this is just like an average common. I might give it like a 7.
How interesting.
Yeah.
I definitely am
Maybe I'm
not
a
giving
little
it
too
higher than an
high.
8.
Yeah,
I'm
four
not
drops are
intimidated.
not like premium. You don't need to prioritize them, but I think this is like just a very average four drop. I think you'll end up playing one in like a lot of red decks, and you're fine playing two. But I don't know. Maybe I'm a little too high. We'll
Maybe
see.
this is why I don't play a lot of red decks.
Okay. Next card, Meticulous Artisan. Three in a red for 3/3 with prowess, and when it enters, create a treasure token. Huh. Uh, Weird card. I guess it's for like double spelling in theory. That's like the joke
Yeah,
being made. But four mana is a lot. 3/3 is not a great blocker. Treasure lets you
time
splash, I
fixes.
guess. Yeah, it's fixing. But it
Okay,
actually
this
is.
actually is fixing. I
No,
mean, it
it,
makes a
it
treasure.
actually is fixing. No, I know, it's just funny. Yeah, I think this card's fine, but like I'm pretty unhappy with the body if I'm putting it in my deck. And so I'm never that excited to play it. I think it's a necessity if I like need fixing and don't have a lot of fours, but I'm pretty unexcited about this one. This might we might be flipped because these cards like go differently in our styles, but I would give this probably like an 8, maybe even an 8.5.
I think this to me isn't just an average common. We've talked about possibly wanting fixing, and I think prowess is a pretty cool ability on creatures. Like typically, add some complexity to the game. I'd probably give it a 7.
It's so funny. We were like exactly flipped on this card and the last card. That's just a great like indication of both of our styles in limited.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we are on to our Omen Dragon for red. The creature side is 5 mana for a 3/3 flying haste creature that has dragon breathing for 1 in a red. The creatures can get +1/+0 until end of turn. And then the sorcery side is 2 mana. Oh, okay, so our um, tormenting voice is on the other side of this Omen. Discard a card if you do draw 2 cards. This is pretty cool. 5 mana for a flying haste creature can help push like final points of damage in an aggro deck. And, I like that our tormenting voice does something. It shuffles back into your deck and can become a creature. And I like having these effects in aggro decks to kind of try to prevent flooding and things like that. And then, on top of that, I can get +1/+0 and be kind of a mana sink. I think this card's pretty cool. I like this a little bit more than the other dragons we've looked at so far, I think. Just like slightly above the rest of the commons. I'd probably put this like a 6.
Hmm. I'm a little lower on it actually than the other dragons. I think the dragon side of it is a little bit worse. Like flying haste is nice, but 3/3 is really small. Like 4 mana 3/3 flyers are typically not amazing, and this is like 5 mana. Give it haste, it's like kind of four-ish. Um, Tormenting Voices are really valuable though. I do think the like filtering from Tormenting Voice and the flexibility of this card are sort of doing the same thing for you. And so I guess to some extent, like I want a Tormenting Voice later in the game when I need to like filter out a land that I drew, and I want this dragon later in the game when I would rather like have an expensive spell than a cheap spell. That's sort of the same thing to me, and so it's sort of duplicative to some extent, a little bit. Not that it's bad, just that you're not getting like additional value from the like different places each of these effects are good. They're sort of good in the same place, at least a little bit to me. Um,
I can see that.
for all those reasons, I think I'm like slightly lower on this than on the other Omen Dragons, but not that much. It's still playable for sure. I would give this 7.5, maybe, something like that. The
You
Tormenting Voice is
convinced me on
nice.
7.
Okay,
I'll go
cool.
down to
So
a
we're
7.
close
But I'm
enough.
also like typically too high on tormenting voice. Um, so I anticipate being a little bit higher on it than the average.
One thing I will actually note, like we should talk about what happens if you put like six of these Omen Dragons in a deck. Does your deck become significantly denser later in the game? And can that be kind of like a way to build a deck to have like a decent late game? What do we think?
Yeah, I think it depends on what the sorcery side is. Like, if the sorcery side is like one of them makes a 2/2 or something, right? Is kind of able to stand on its own, develop the board, then that feels like it might be kind of strong. But I think if you have five of all the dragons are expensive, so if the Omen side is just tormenting voice, then I
Right,
don't
you
think you're
can't
gonna
play too
get
many of
enough
those.
through the early game to like play three mana or 5 mana 3/3 flyers 3 turns in a row. So and I don't think you're gonna want that. Like the sorcery sides of these, I don't think are good enough that you're gonna want like high densities of the dragons. I think they'll be fine in one or two O's, but I don't know if you're gonna want piles of them.
Yeah, I
At
think
least
I
my
agree. I
instinct.
just wanted to bring it up. I think like that is a subtle deck building thing that you can do a little bit of. Like, oh, I have three of these dragons that I happen to want to play for the Omen, so I can like adjust my deck a little bit away from needing
Mhm.
late game spells because I will like have these that I'm drawing more often. But yeah, it's a very minor thing. Just wanted to note it.
I agree. All right, now we are on to Narset's Rebuke. This is 5 mana instant. Deals 5 damage to target creature. Add Jeskai mana. If this creature would die this turn, exile it. So generally, these 5 mana removal spells are like if you need a removal spell, you can play them. Um, that's like just generally true of the expensive like red and black removal spells. If you can't find anything better, you have them. This one's kind of cool, given that it adds Jeskai. It
I
adds to
mean,
like double spelling for 5 mana. You can use it, kill a creature, and then use the double spell with the mana to trigger like flurry or these two spell things. But I still think it's just like, a kind of overcosted removal spell. I'm probably putting this. It is still a removal spell, and it does enough damage that I'm putting it above like most commons. So I'm probably putting it as about a 6.
what do you mean, Nicole? This isn't a 5 mana removal spell. This is a 2 mana removal spell. Uh, Not really. It still, for most intents and purposes, costs 5 because you can't use it to kill something for 2 mana most of the time. But like, I do think that adding mana ability is pretty valuable,
But Ryan, it's fixing.
especially. Okay, this one I don't know if I'll grant you. This one's kind of tough. If you have a cheap card, I guess it's fixing. But
I think I've decided
yeah,
if I ever make merch, that's what it's gonna be.
that's a
It's
good
just gonna
it's a
say it's
good
kind of
merch.
fixing, right?
It's kind of fixing. um, I think this card might actually be pretty sweet in the decks that are trying to double spell. Like, I don't know, 3 mana is a lot. I feel like you'll be able to cast a follow up a lot of the time in those decks. So, but I guess all of that kind of adds up to me giving it like the same grade as you because I would normally give these 5 mana removal spells like an 8. So I think that
Hmm.
like brings it to a 6. Like, and there will be a lot of turns where this sort of legitimately does cost 2 mana, and that's really powerful. But there will also be turns where it just costs 5, and that's like pretty clunky. So I think like slightly above average common is where I'd land. So like 6. Yeah, I agree. Next card, Fleeting Effigy. We're in the uncommons now. This is single red for a 2/2 haste. At the beginning of your end step, return it to its owner's hand, and it has 2 in a red to give it +2/+0 until end of turn. So this card, you're not allowed to keep this card on the battlefield. This is kind of a callback to the dash mechanic from Dragons of Tarkir, but it doesn't have the option to play it without quote unquote dashing it. Um, Interesting. This
It's
is
not
kind of just a
Ragavan.
card that like it is Ragavan. It is not certainly. Um, yeah, this is a very weird card. I think it's mostly bad. I'm gonna say like it kind of just does them damage, and if they have a blocker with 3 toughness, it like doesn't do them damage unless you're spending your whole turn to pump it. They can always trade it off with a 2 power creature whenever they want. So, and you have to just keep spending so much mana into this that like is it's a 1 drop, but it's not really a 1 drop. It's kind of like a 4 drop or a 6 drop. Like you're just going to be spending so much mana on this if you're using it over the course of the game. I'm pretty down on this card. I'd give it like a 9, maybe even a 10. Where are you at?
Yeah, I'll give it a 9. I don't think it's unplayable. Maybe there's an aggro deck that wants it, but I am not very high on it. 9 is, yeah, I don't think it's deserving of the 10 slot.
Fair enough.
All right, now we are on to Channeled Dragonfire. This one is actually shock. 1 red for a sorcery deals 2 damage to any target. I guess it is a sorcery, but it does have harmonize, so you can do it again. And it, is 1 mana, will let you do some of the double spell things. And it does seem like there's enough 2 toughness creatures in this format that this will be playable. Um, I still don't think this is anything crazy, and the harmonized cost is really expensive. I'm probably putting this at about like where I am on most commons. Um, like a 7 is where I'm feeling the vibes.
I kind of like this card. I think I'm a little higher on it. Like, your opponent is sort of virtually at 2 less life whenever you have this card, just because if they get to 2, they're just dead because you can spend your entire turn harmonizing it. Um, and that does matter. And like, in a grindy game, you will find the time to spend a tapped creature and 3 mana, right, to like kill a 2 toughness creature and just get like an extra card out of this. And 1 mana is really efficient, so you don't totally care if it's killing like a only medium early creature on their side because you only spent 1 mana on it, and then you get a card back for free later on. You also might have synergies with like cards leaving your graveyard or double spelling or something like that. I don't know. I think I'm pretty high on this. I'd probably give it like a 4 or a 5. I think it might just be kind of sweet.
Interesting. I could see being a little higher on it than I am currently. I guess like 2 mana, 2 damage and limited has just like felt so underwhelming recently. But I could see it being better in this set.
It also like can just be 4 damage on a turn if you need it to be sometimes. So I don't know. You'll be in a 3 color deck, so you won't often have triple red. But yeah, I think somewhere in between our grades is probably like the most accurate.
All
Next
right.
card, Shocking Sharpshooter. This is
I'm
not
shocked.
shock.
Like it's
One in a
literally shooting
red.
the arrow at me.
He is. Yeah, on my screen in particular, he's like shooting across the monitor towards your recording. Um, so 1 in a red for a 1/3 reach, and whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent. So the obvious joke here is mobilize. Your mobilized creatures basically deal double damage with this out, and it's just like a 2 drop. Um, this kind of effect, like we've seen as 1 in a red for an enchantment in Impact Tremors. That card wasn't very good in limited, but this just comes with a free 1/3 reach body. Like, I think this is a pretty good rate. I'm kind of
I think
excited
this
about
card's a
this card.
banger.
Yeah, I agree. It's just going to deal so much damage to them in a mobilized deck. Like, oh my goodness, it's easy for me to see this dealing 5 to your opponent, like without
Yeah,
much
like they put the black
difficulty.
creature on 4 mana and drain, and now all of a sudden this one's, it's not draining, it's pinging, but it's on 2 mana. I think this card's
Right,
good.
I
I,
agree.
I like. I'm almost at the point of calling this card like a 4. I think this card's going to be
I was going to say a
uh,
4. Yeah, I
a
think this is a 4.
difficult to get.
4 for
All
Shocking
right.
Sharpshooter. A shocking grade.
Now we are on to Sunset Strike Master. This is 2 mana for a 3/1 mana dork. The top's for red. And then for 3 mana, you can tap sacrifice this creature to deal 6 damage to target creature with flying. Um,
Weird card.
Interesting effect to put on a 3/1 mana dork. I think I'm not terribly excited about this card. 3/1 means it can be a nice attacker after it's done accelerating your mana a little bit. Um, I don't think we're going to sacrifice it to kill flyers very often, but that's a cool addition.
It
I
is the
think I put
dragon
this
set.
probably. Yeah, I think I'd probably put it like above the commons, but not much higher than that. Like a 6 would be my guess.
I agree. Yeah, like notably, this is sort of a weird new color pie thing for red, just having like a mana dork straight up. Um, I think I don't really know how good like mana dorks are in red decks. They're probably not great, just because your spells tend to be cheaper and you're not like ramping to things. But this has a nice buyout of just like killing a dragon in the late game when the mana ability and the body are no longer relevant. Um, I sort of feel subjectively higher on this card than how you were talking about it, but I would give it the same grade. I would say it's a 6.
Okay. All
Next card
right.
is Reverberating Summons. 1 in a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of each combat, if you've cast 2 or more spells this turn, this enchantment becomes a 3/3 monk creature with haste in addition to its other types until end of turn, and you can pay 1 in a red, discard your hand, sacrifice this enchantment, and draw 2 cards. Fascinating. This is a very weird little card. Um, it's kind of a 3/3 on turn 4 if you can cast it with another 2 drop, and then it's sort of a draw 2 once you've run out of gas in the late game. So, like, it's obviously the joke is that it, like, keeps letting you double spell to some extent, but I'm pretty skeptical. Where are
I think it's kind of
you
bad.
leaning? Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's unplayable. I probably have it like an 8, but it just doesn't seem like the kind of card these decks want.
Yeah, like I keep trying to read it as if it like tormenting voices when it enters or something because that feels like the card
Mhm.
does, but it doesn't actually do that. Um, and it's just not going to be a creature enough of the time, I don't think, to like actually be good enough. Having to spend 2 mana to discard your hand and draw 2 with this means that like it's going to be really hard to double spell even if you draw 2 spells. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think I'm off of it. I think I agree. Like probably an 8. I just don't think you need to ever prioritize this card.
I agree. All right. We are on to Unsparing Boltcaster. This is 3 mana for a 3/3. When this creature enters, it deals 5 damage to target creature and opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. Okay, so typically effects like this, I don't really care for a whole lot in limited. You know, it like they require a certain amount of things to go right in most games for this effect to be relevant. That being said, with the mobilize mechanic, this definitely seems like it might be more premier than it is in most sets. Um, something is gonna like block the mobilized creature to kind of deal with the point of damage for free or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you can kill it. Um, that being said, it does still need a lot to work. I think I put this probably like slightly above the commons. I think about a 6 is probably where I'm at.
Yeah, I think the body is like good enough where if you only sometimes get the effect, you're overall pretty happy with that. And with mobilize, you're going to get the effect a decent amount. So yeah, I think this is like a little bit better than it would be in most other sets. I agree. I think like 6. I think that's a good place for it. Next, we have
All right.
Zergo's Vanguard. 2 and a red for a star 3 with mobilize 1, and its power is equal to the number of creatures you control. So, haha, when you attack with it, it gets greater power. It's at least a 2/3 on attacks, probably a little bit more. It's a dog, funnily enough. Dog soldier, even though it's like riding a spider or something. Um, this card's nice. Like, it's a mobilize thing. It sort of does mobilize stuff. Uh, Pretty solid body. So yeah, I would give this maybe a 5, maybe a 6. I think I'm like valuing cards with mobilize somewhat higher just because, like I said in the end of the white video, like there's just so many cards that work with them. So I think I'm giving it a little bit of a bump for that, but I think I'd put this at like a 5.
I think I'm at a 5. I think this card's kind of a banger.
Yeah,
It's cool. It's got mobilize. The creature's power um is means that this thing's probably gonna get pretty big pretty fast. I like it. I'm a fan.
cool.
All right, we are on the Overwhelming Surge. 3 mana for an instant. Choose one or both. It deals 3 damage to target creature or destroy target non-creature artifact. Non-creature artifact. Okay, so I mean, I guess part of how you value this in this set is the artifact slot, which we have not yet looked at. I know it is like at least a little relevant because we do know there's a mana rock, and it looks like there's some creatures that are artifacts.
There's also
And
these like uncommon fixers that like tutor up a land and have like a spell ability on them that I think are going to be played in almost every deck. So that's I think the main thing that this is supposed to be going after. Just
it
noting
deals
that I
three
forget what
damage to
they're
target
called,
creature.
but
I think this card's
yeah,
pretty good. It's flexible.
yeah,
I don't think it's like premier removal spell. I don't think I'm giving it like the 3 that we give a lot of our removal spells, but it's probably a 4.
I would go with like a 5 maybe for
Yeah,
this. I don't think
I could
there's going
also
to be
see a
enough
5.
non-creature artifacts that I'm like actively excited about it. But actually, I don't know. 3 mana for 3 damage to just a creature is kind of a lot, to be honest. I might even say like a 6 or a 7. I feel like this card might just be average.
I
I
could see
think I'm
that.
smelling average for this. So I'm gonna boldly give it a 7, I guess.
I think I'm not
Yeah,
giving it lower than a 6. You know, like at the very least, it is a removal spell, even if it's a little overcosted.
that's
I
true.
think that
Instant
that
speed
has
is nice.
high enough value. Um, yeah, I
I
think
don't know,
I'm
like
definitely not
compare
giving
it
it
to
lower than a
Lightning
6.
Strike in Aether Drift, right? Like it could just be 3 mana Lightning Strike.
Yeah, but Lightning Strike looks like it would be a lot more broken in this set.
That's true. That's very true.
I
Yep, and I
think
think
I'm
that's
going
what
to end
matters
with a
more here.
solid 5.
Okay,
I'm giving
I'm
it a
gonna
5.
say 7.
All
We
right.
can agree to disagree. Next up, Equilibrium Adept. 3 and a red for a 2/4. When it enters, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. And Flurry, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, this creature gains double strike until end of turn. I like this package a lot. Like that ability, especially when it says until the end of your next turn, you get a
Mhm.
full untap step to be able to cast the spell. That's very, very close to just saying draw a card on it. And then
Yeah,
sometimes this being a basically 4/4 creature or like a 2/4 double strike, I like it. Like the body is good enough to really matter, and it just kind of also draws you a card. So this card's sweet. I'd give it like a 5 probably.
yeah, I'm about in the same place. I do think it gets plus a point for the art. It's just so good. It's a dog, and the dog
The
is
dog
just really
monk.
vibing. And look,
Yeah.
smiling. What a baby. All right, now we are into not cute things. War effort. 4 mana for an enchantment.
Just
Creatures you control.
the group's official stance on war. Can we give it? Boo.
Ooh.
Okay, we had to make that statement.
4 mana for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+0. Whenever you attack, make a mobilize.
Yep, exactly.
I'm shortening that to mobilize. Um, I think this card might be good. I
I
think
agree.
I don't think you're gonna need to prioritize it because your deck's probably not gonna want more than like one. But with the mobilize mechanic, I do think that this is gonna be like a significant card. Um,
2/1s are so much harder to block than 1/1s.
yeah, and they just do so much more damage.
Yeah.
I'm probably at like a 5.5 because I'm nervous to say something is like this is a 5. But I do think you would like one in your mobilized decks.
Yeah, the card's very bad at blocking. Like, gotta get that out of the
Yeah,
way. It does nothing on defense, but it is kind of a banger on offense. And I think a lot of red decks are gonna really want it. So I could even say it's like a 4, but I think it's very hard to have a card be actively great and limited if it doesn't do anything on defense or like to catch you up from being behind. So
especially at
yeah,
4 mana.
I think a 5 is like pretty fair. I think we'll be a little safer and give this a 5. I
All
like
right,
it.
we're on the same page.
Cool. All right, next up we have an Is This Fixing banger, Iridescent Tiger, 4 and a red for a 3/4. When this creature enters, if you cast it, add Wooburg. Uh, this is fixing, I think. Like
It's fixing.
you cast this, and then you just get to cast any 3-color card that you want, basically.
Yeah, it works with the 2 spell deck. It's also a 3/4 that replaces its mana for the turn.
Yeah.
Storm who? I don't know.
Yeah, this
Good
card's
card.
sweet. Now I'm honestly thinking like, should we brew with this in standard? Like Pixie Bounce something? I don't know.
Pixie
Blink,
bounce with
whatever.
a red tiger that makes Wooburg.
Yeah. Uh, I think this card might actually be like kind of sweet. Like it's sort of a free 3/4 that you cast on turn 5 or later to some extent. And like that's really nice when you can have another spell to follow this up with. And I think most of the time you will. It also doesn't have to be a spell. You can cast this, or sorry, it doesn't have to be a spell from your hands. You can cast this and like harmonize from your graveyard or use some mana ability or whatever. So like,
Oh,
yeah,
it's
I think this
especially
card's
cool
just
with
sweet.
Harmonize because it also can tap for Harmonize.
Exactly. There's basically no harmonized card you can not cast after you play this, except the like red shock one, like anything with double pips. But even then, like just wait till 6 mana and have double red, and you're fine. Um, yeah, this card's great. Well, it's definitely good. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
it's great.
I'm at probably a 5. On the like it's good but not sure it's great. And I think that's mostly because the red decks we've seen so far um are like a lot of them are low costed and very aggressive and like low to the ground, which this is not quite exactly where that is. We talked about the other colors being like, white and blue were support colors, and black seemed like a very strong like base color. Red seems like it wants to be the main attraction. Like it's, most of the cards seem like you want to be doing aggressive things. You want to be a red card. Not super, where this like feels like more of a support card for other colors. Like it doesn't super line up with exactly what the red decks are doing. And because of that, I think I would give it a 5. If it aligned a little bit better with the strategy, I could see going even higher on it, because I do think the card is very cool. But I think because it doesn't super line up, I'm going to put it at a 5.
I agree. I think 5 is exactly where I want to land. It could be higher. Like, this is kind of a weird card that might outperform, but it also might underperform. Like, 3/4 is not a great body. Maybe it's just too hard to be able to use all of the mana effectively. So, yeah, I think 5 is right where I'd land.
Well, what you can use 5 mana on is our last red card, Breaching Dragonstorm. I didn't read it, but I did read that it was 5 mana, so we'll see if we want to play it or not. Breaching Dragonstorm is a 5 mana enchantment. When it enters, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You can cast it without paying its mana cost if that spell's mana value is 8 or less. If you don't, put it in your hand. I don't think we want to cast this card. It's
Hey,
like
wait. When
five.
a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. Isn't it sweet?
This is a commander card, I think, not really a limited card. Most of the time you cast this, you're going to end up with a card that is cheaper than the card itself, and you just don't want your decks to be that random and unfocused. I think this will be one of my few 10s.
I agree. Yeah, like, you're not usually casting a card that costs 4 or 5 or even 6 or 7, 8 mana. Like, this is going to cast a 3-drop. Be honest with yourself. This is going to cast a 3-drop most of the time. Sometimes
And even if
two
it
or
cast
a 1.
a 5-drop, you would just want to play that 5-drop.
Right, exactly. So yeah, no, this card is
I don't want to
stinky.
cast
I'll
it
give it a
once, let
10.
alone several times. I don't
Agreed.
want to pick up this one and put it down. Okay. Alright, so I'm ending this. I'm going back to this. I'm editing this name to be red. And then I'm going to record an outro. And I'm telling you now, I think we may need to do multicolor when we do the rares. I personally am running out of stamina. I can push through the green one. I'd like to get through green. But I don't know if I can push through
Okay.
multicolor tonight.
Yeah, like I said, it takes a long time. You really have to block out a lot of time
Yeah.
for
I
it.
mean, I'm like prepared to block out more time. This is not even like a time
Yeah.
thing. I have plenty of time to do it. I'm probably not going to go to bed. Even if we took like an hour or two break and came back to it, I just don't have the
Mental,
stamina
like,
to give
going
this
through
kind
all
of
the cards
energy
today.
for
Totally.
this
Yeah. No, it makes
long.
sense. I think probably we should just plan on doing it separately on a different day than we do the rares, because the rares are almost equally long. That's my warning. They take a lot longer to talk about because they're just more complicated. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm up for whatever. I have off tomorrow, and then Monday is also my day off.
I could
Um
do multicolored tomorrow morning because I'm going to a party late tomorrow, or like tomorrow afternoon. But I could do tomorrow morning.
what is the morning?
Uh, Party's at 3, so I would need to leave at like 2. So we would need to finish before 2.
Okay, so if we start like noon, that's okay.
Yes, but we have to like
Noon
actually
is the
start at
absolute
noon.
latest.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. There's a chance if you wake up at like 7, like you did today,
Okay.
I'm gonna be like, okay, let's go.
Let's just do
I'm
it.
just
Okay.
warning you.
Okay. I will
It's really
probably be up
difficult
at
for me
7, so I'll message you.
coming back from Las Vegas time zone to
Yeah,
immediately
that's
having a
rough.
really screwed up sleep schedule. It's really hard for me to know, like, right now I'm awake, and after this I'm gonna like keep doing stuff. I'm gonna like clean my room and be a human or whatever. So like if we started recording this morning when I was awake at 7, I would have started when I was awake at 7.
Right.
So we can probably like just be flexible with me. My sleep schedule's really fucked.
Yep, of course. I think let's try to sneak it in tomorrow morning.
Okay, I agree. Let me record the red outro, and then we'll do green, and then we can call it for the night. All right, so outro. You can tell I'm like not super focused anymore. All right, thank you for watching the red cards of the Tarkir set review. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing this video, all things that are super helpful to the algorithm. If you want to support either of us more directly, you can do so through Patreon. Ryan's Patreon is great. I've now bragged about it more times than I can count, but I think you should at least go look at it. Ryan's Patreon is an incredible resource, and has lots of cool free content on top of what you can get if you pay for it. So do yourself a favor, go check it out. It's worth your time, I promise. And then I also have a Patreon. If you care about Esper Pixie at all, you should definitely have it. Otherwise, I post some blogs and some thoughts about how I'm getting better through Magic. As someone relatively new to the competitive space, I think it is pretty cool. And with all of that, we will see you guys in the next one. All right.
I like that we've settled on I do two hand motions during the sign off, and that's like my communication. I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, I figured it's easier this way.
Yep.
Now I wonder, will anyone come to protect you? Okay.
All right, I'm gonna switch chairs, I
No.
think. Sorry.
No, don't worry about it.
Let me just make sure it's aligned correctly.
We're back to the ground. This is
Yes.
fun. We're like all kind of in the same angle when we go to this one. All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next rendition of the Tarkir Dragonstorm Limited Set Review. I am joined today by the lovely Ryan Connon. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm one of Nicole's teammates on Sanctum and also just a friend, and we love talking about Limited together, so we decided to do this set review.
Here we are. So by now, we've gotten with the flow. We've done a couple of these, and so now we're going to talk about green. And we're going to start with Snakeskin Veil. This one is a reprint. I'm positive.
Yep, we know this
So,
one.
if you've never read Snakeskin Veil before in your, couple of years playing either limited or standard or any other format, it is 1 green for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end of turn. Snakeskin Veil is typically a serviceable limited card. Like the last time we saw it was OTJ, giving something hexproof, frequently blew things out. It can also be kind of used as a combat trick, which is cool. And this set, I actually think it's going to be even one step possibly better than that, because black-green is a counters archetype. And with Abzan, there are things that reference counters. We talked about a black 1/2 that does like drains every time it attacks if it has a counter. Snakeskin Veil is a cool way of doing that. And just with the way that creatures are statted, Snakeskin Veil seems like it's going to be totally serviceable. You never need to take this highly because you don't really want more than 1 typically in your limited decks. If we're calling like 7 an average common, I think I want to give this like a 6.5. I like it more than like the average common, generally, like specifically the first copy. But I don't want more than 1. So maybe 7 is just the right number.
Yeah, I think I'd just give it a 7. Like, it's probably better. The first copy is better than a different common most of the time, but you don't need to prioritize it again, like you said, because you only really want 1. It gets better if you have a bomb, just noting, like that's a relevant interaction. It's hard to have counter synergies if you're like proactively using it, because then it's just like not really a great card. So you kind of need to mostly still use it as removal protection. But yeah, I think like pick it like an average common and try to end up playing 1 in most of your green decks. Next card we've got is Enoch Wayfarer, 1 and a green for a 1/1. When it enters, mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among them into your hand, and if you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So most of the time it is 2 mana, 1/1, and draw a land, and then you kind of get a buyout of it becoming a 2/2 if you unluckily didn't get a land, or if you are late in the game and you don't want a land, that can also sometimes happen. But most of the time you're playing this to like mill and grab a land in the early game, which I like quite a bit. Like sometimes this card will miss, but most of the time it will hit. We've kind of seen this effect on like 3 mana 2/3s recently in limited, and those tend to be sometimes they're good, sometimes they're just mid. They're never terrible. And I think I like this effect being on a 2 drop a lot more than being on a 3 drop, just for like smoothing purposes. And this does count as fixing, I will say, Nicole. This is like, half of a fixer at least in your deck. It's a little bit worse than some of those effects we've seen because it can't get the land back from your graveyard. It has to be from the milled cards. So you're really kind of rolling the dice whenever you cast this. Um, but overall, I like this card a lot. It's like exactly kind of what you want in a greedy, soupy green deck. So I would give it probably a 7, maybe even a 6, kind of depending on your drafting preferences.
Yeah, I think this is going to be kind of crazy because this definitely seems like a card that fits more in my draft style. I'm actually going to give it like probably a 7.5. We have seen this effect, and obviously I like the effect. I think the only problem is this card is statted like really poorly. Like you really do want it to hit a land when you play it, and it feels bad to hit
Yeah,
a
you're
land and then
you're
get a
pretty
1/1.
sad if you only have a 2 mana 2
Um,
2.
yeah, like it just doesn't block well, really at all. And so I'm not very excited. I think like I can take it. It can be a 2 drop. It can, block early to help me get to later games in value decks, but I don't think I'm excited by it by any means.
No, you know what? Yeah, you're convincing me because like if you get the 1/1, it's just really not a valuable body at all. And so all you kind of did was cycle for a land, and that's like not something to spend 2 mana on. I think I was overrating this because I was like conflating the body mattering and getting the land, but those never happen at the same time. And either way, you're a little bit sad in a
Yeah,
certain
and
way.
if you don't get a land, you got a bear.
Right, exactly. So yeah, no, I think you're right. I think a 7 is pretty fair for this. It might even be a little bit worse. So I guess I'm landing exactly where you said, 7.5.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, now we are to the green devotee. This is the Sultai devotee. This is a 2 mana 2/1 with Death Touch. And this one filters for Teamer colors. I like this one. I like Death Touch. You can keep it around when you want it to filter, and when you don't need it to filter, it's a great blocker. Death Touch is a great ability. I think I like this more than I like the other ones. I think I put the worst ones that filter at 6. I think this one's definitely at least a 5. But if we treated the other like decent ones as a 5, I'm putting this one at like a 4.5. I think Death Touch is a really strong keyword, and it filters. I like it.
Yeah, I think Death Touch is really good. I do think this is like a pretty significantly worse blocker against the aggro decks than like the blue 3/3 defender. And so it's more of a like relevant body in these like large deck mirrors where you're gonna have like big green creatures fighting each other. It's just really bad at blocking mobilized creatures with that 1 toughness. I think they very intentionally gave this 1 and not 2 toughness because at 2 toughness it would just be super duper good. Um, but yeah, like structurally, like we said in the earlier videos, you want to prioritize these cards in draft because they let you splash the powerful multicolored cards, and that's usually what this format's going to end up being about. And they're like defensible bodies on their own. This one's a totally defensible body. I think I'm putting it at like a 5. I think this is a card you'll want to pick up early, but like later in the draft when you have enough fixing or have almost enough fixing and you have enough twos, then like you kind of don't really want this card just as the body. Not like actively don't want it, just like you don't actively want it, I guess. It's like fine. So yeah, only a very, very tiny tick lower than you, but very good. I think tied for the best devotee with the blue one, I think, for me.
Yeah.
Next card, Leopard, Undergrowth Leopard. Um, 1 in a green for a 2/2 cat with vigilance, and has 1, sacrifice this creature, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Uh, Fine, pretty unimpressive. Like the 2/2 body is usually not going to be that good. I think this is like a functional reprint from an OTJ card, which was like, again, kind of fine. but not great. This does not seem to be an artifact and enchantment set, but there will be some that are good to kill. Um, yeah, not super excited about this. I'm probably at like a 7.5.
Yeah, I'd give it a 7. I think it's a totally average common. Your deck needs some amount of 2 drops, so you have to take it um, with a certain amount of like, um, what's the word called? Losing my brain. With a certain amount of priority, but nothing that's like anything crazy. All
Very
right, we are
medium.
now medium. Yes, we are now at Heritage Reclamation. This is a 2-mana instant. So this looks like our new Paw Patch formation type card. Um, choose one, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile up to one target card from a graveyard, draw a card. Worse than Paw Patch formation, but exiling a card, you know, especially in the sideboard. Like, I think I'd love to have one of these in my sideboard if it was like relevant for a graveyard deck. At the very worst, it's 2 mana cycle, but it can also destroy things. So, how good these cards end up being are super relevant on how good the uh, artifacts and enchantments in the format are. But typically, I value these at like the base of what a common is, like around a 7.
Yeah, I think you want to value them around there just because they can be really useful to have in your sideboard. But I don't think I'm usually ever main decking this unless I have really specific like leaving graveyard synergies. And even then I'm
Mhm.
kind of like maybe I play it, maybe I don't. It's sort of a clunky way to enable them and it might have extra value by killing something that matters. But yeah, I think this is going to be a format where naturalizes are not like cards that normally act as removal.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think this is more a sideboard card, but you should prioritize sideboard cards while you're drafting better than cards that are like just middle commons. So, yeah, I think 7 is like exactly where I'd put this.
Unless you're playing best of one on Arena.
Yes, of course, if there are
Won't
no
help you get to
sideboards,
Mythic.
ignore that. Next, we have Sarkhan's Resolve. 1 in a green. For an instant, you can choose 1 or 2. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn, or destroy target creature with flying. I spoke a little bit ambiguously there. You choose one of them. So you either get +3/+3 or plummet. Um, it's like a combat trick with a buyout of killing a dragon. Uh, sure. I'm not that excited about it. You don't get any abilities. You don't get evasion. You don't get trample. Um, I'm probably putting this at like an 8. I think it's like a below average common.
Mhm. Something else I like having in my sideboard sometimes.
Yep.
All right. I need some trail mix. Sorry for the delay. This is Piercing Exhale. There was an exhale in red. Was there an exhale in every color? Did I just miss it? Or was there only
I
one in
think
red and
so.
green?
No, there was
Okay.
the blue one that was the counter spell, and the white one that was the attacking or blocking 5 damage.
All right. So this is part of the exhale cycle. 2 mana for an instant. As an additional cast cost to cast the spell, you may behold a dragon. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker if a dragon was beheld Servile 2. Okay, this is your bite. There's one of these in every set. They're always at baseline good, slightly above the average common, at least always. This is another one. I would say you should ignore this behold a dragon text. If you've got a dragon you can get to surveil, great, congratulations, give yourself a pat on the back. But other than that, you're pretty happy to play the card without it. Um, I would say I typically put these somewhere between a 5 and a 6 in my head. Um, it is a removal spell, and in a lot of green decks, you don't have the removal from some of the other colors sometimes. And so, I typically like having these, but it does vary set to set.
Yeah, I think important to note that the version in this set is an instant, so be on the lookout for it in combat. Yeah, it's like a fine card, probably slightly better than the average common. I think I'm good giving it like a 6. Next, we have Champion of Dusan. 2 in a green for a 4/2 with trample. And you can renew 1 in a green, exile this card from your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter and a trample counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery. So, this, along with the 4 mana 4/2 in black,
Yeah, it becomes
is just yeah, it's a 7/7, I think, right? Trample, which is just
mm-hmm.
sweet. Um, On its own, this is like a decent rate. I think Trample goes a good way to like making this a little bit better than just a 3 mana 4/2. And then
Yeah.
you're happy-ish if it dies to trade with something, deal them like 1 or 2 damage, and then you can get some value out of it later. So I think this is like average common level. I put it at like a 7.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I started eating my trail mix again.
If you want me to ever do another card, just let me know.
I got it. We got a 3 mana 4/4 defender. Crow-Tick Nest card. What is this? Is it a
It's an
bug? Is it a
insect.
crab?
I think it's a bug because it says insect.
It's a big bug.
True.
Don't watch if you're afraid of bugs. It's a 4/4 with defender, and then for 3 mana, you can have it attack as though it didn't have defender. You know, average cards. I will say that you've come off a couple of formats where everyone says that green has been pretty strong, and I think things like this are kind of clear representations of why. The green cards are just statted well. 4/4s are great blockers. We have not seen a lot of creatures that at 3 mana, like other than a couple of 4/2s, can attack over this. Um, and that's kind of what we're seeing with all these. Like, a lot of the other colors have like 2/1s, and this one has a 2/2 with vigilance, and the creatures are just statted pretty well. So that's something to keep an eye out when you think about like what colors you're playing. But I think this card's like totally serviceable. I don't really like having defender things in my deck, so I'm probably putting it a little lower than the average common. But I think it's fine. Probably an 8.
Yeah, I think 3 mana is like a lot to spend on one attack, with a 4/4. So most of the time, I'm kind of evaluating this as like a 3 mana 4/4 defender, which is just okay. I think I agree, like an 8. I think this is a below average common for sure. But the stats are there, and in the late game, it does just kind of count as a 4/4. So next, we've got Roamer's Routine. 2 and a green for a rampant growth. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle at sorcery speed. And it has Harmonize for 4 and a green. Yeah, it's a pretty standard card.
Fixing.
It's like this one counts. This one's definitely fixing. Um, I'm not that excited about it. Like 3 mana is a lot to spend for that kind of effect, and then it's sort of hard to have it be worth spending 5 mana slash a couple mana and tapping a creature to do it again, just because once you've kind of gotten your mana out and played your creatures out, then you don't have that much use for more mana. But in these like big limited decks, like the kinds both of us like to draft at various points, you will sometimes need to grab your fourth splash color or your fifth splash color, or you'll need to, spend a lot of mana over the course of the game, and this helps you do that. So it's fine, but I'm pretty not excited about it. I think I would say like you'll know when you want this, but you can draft it at like a 9 probably.
No, I'm excited. I think I'm giving it a 6. It's fixing. I really like this harmonized text actually. We just talked about how there's a lot of creatures that are statted pretty well. There's like a couple of these 4/2s at 3 mana, and whatever it is where you can pay this harmonized cost with like one creature and a green to get an additional land. It's a 3-color set, so fixing is even more valuable than it is in like a regular set. I don't know. I like it. Good
Fair
fixing.
enough. I think what's going to happen is this card is going to have a very low win rate on 17 lands, and then Nicole is going to crush me with it in some pod drafts. I think that's what's going to happen.
Cheers.
Cheers, indeed.
All right. We have Sagu. He looks like a
I don't know.
Sagu. Sagu
Sagu, I feel like
Pummeler.
it's how I usually say it, but yeah.
We got a 4 mana 4/4 beast. He's angry. He's yelling. With reach. It's got renew. So for 5 mana, 4 and a green, you can exile from your graveyard to put 2+1/+1 counters and a reach counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. This card's, I think, above rate. 4 mana
I
4/4 with
agree.
reach that can also put counters and a reach card. This card I think is good.
It turns
And
any card
the
into like a
creatures are
really, really
understated
relevant
so well.
creature. I know, yeah. This is the oh my gosh, what was the 4 mana 4/4 reach in Eighth Adrift? It's basically that card to some extent. Um, that one had trample,
So
I
like
guess, so it's a little
Hazard,
bit different.
you're talking about Hazard of the
Hazard of the
Dunes.
Dunes. Yep, there you go. Thanks. Yeah, this card's great. I would give it like a 6, maybe even a 5.
5.5. I like the
5.5,
middle.
perfect. This card is a banger. This might be one of our highest rated comments. I don't know. Trade Route Envoy. 3 and a green for a 4/3. When this creature enters, draw a card if you control a creature with a counter on it. If you don't draw a card this way, put a counter, a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So
Banger alert.
baseline, it's just a 4 mana 5/4. Green just gets that. Your mom lets you have 4 mana 5/4s. That's incredible. I mean, it's not like a bomb level card, but it's like very strong. I mean, those stats are nothing to
Mhm.
sneeze about. And then, okay, all right, what if it's not a 4 mana 5/4? Oh, it's just a 4 mana 4/3 that draws me a card. This card's dumb. This kid's like really pushed for a common.
Yeah, I agree. I want to give it a 4.
Yep, I'm down. I'm total agreement for exactly.
And you get the perks of really great art too.
True.
All right, now we are on to our Omen Green Dragon. It looks like our dragon is a little underrated compared to the other ones. It's 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer. When it enters, you gain 3 life. However, the green portion is search your library for a basic land, reveal it, and put it in your hand. This means that in some decks you can play this like in replacement of a land. Like with other ramp sources, and it is good fixing. I think that with a 3-color deck and several powerful cards, you will actively want one of these in your deck. But I don't think it's like really above an average common. But because you actively want it, I want to give it higher than a 7. So I want to give it a 6.5.
I agree. I'd even go to a 6. Like, I think this card is almost free to put in your green decks. Now,
Mm,
exercise caution when I say that. I think you need to do careful math about your mana base, have enough untapped or like early green sources.
you're
But
telling me I can't play 12 lands and 5 of these?
no, and I most of the time wouldn't change this for a land. I would change it for a spell because you have that spell buyout. So it kind of built in sort of means that you're not going to flood nearly as much if you put a lot of these in your deck as like normally you would with these kind of lay of the land effects. But it's obviously a concern. Maybe if you have like 2 or 3 of them, maybe you cut a land at some point. But regardless, like this is a great card if you're good at building limited mana bases because it just is a split card between a spell and a land, and it's a good land at that. It's like a fixing land if you're base green. So I love this card. I'm a huge fan of it. I think I would give it probably, I might even say like a 6. I think I'm just pretty high on this card.
I'm ready to draft some base green 5-color decks.
I
That's
knew
what
it
this is
wouldn't be
telling
that
me.
hard to convince you to move it up. Yep, 6 it is. Okay, we've got Dustyet Earth Carver. I hope I pronounced that correctly. 5 and a green for a 4/4 reach, and when it enters, it endures 3. So it's either a 6 mana 7/7 or a 6 mana 4/4 reach and a 3/3. Yeah, that's like fair rate probably for a 6 mana common creature in limited.
Yeah.
That's not amazing. Like if you make it the 7/7 reach because you like need to block a big flyer or something, then it can just get removed and you're sort of sad because you spent 7 mana or 6 mana on something that just got killed.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is like I would just say exactly average common. Maybe a little bit worse than that because you don't need to prioritize 6 drops. Migrating Ketradon, I would say this is not, but it's not that far off either.
I think it's good. I definitely don't think it's like remotely comparable to Ketradon. Ketradon
Yeah,
was like a great card. This I think is like just fine. I'm probably giving this like a 7.
I agree. I think 7's perfect for it.
All right.
Into the
Unlike our 6 mana
uncommons.
creatures, now we have a 1 mana one. This is Dragon Sniper. That's a fun name. I like the flavor of this card. It is a 1/1. Vigilance, Reach, Death Touch. This is like almost a removal spell. I think this card's kind of sick.
This card's so annoying to play against. You just basically have to trade it off for your big creature, whatever they want to trade it off for. Because if you don't, it just keeps pecking in for one. I mean, obviously, if you have a small creature, they kind of can't peck in, but then it's holding off that small creature too. Like, this card's just so annoying. You're always getting 1 mana's worth of value out of it, pretty much. So, Yeah, this card's great. I wish they gave it protection from dragons. I think they had like a one drop in one of the old con sets that had protection from dragons, but yeah, like they didn't want to add that text. I understand. It would have made for a sweet card. It's still a sweet card.
It's already pretty pushed.
I would give this a 5, I think.
Yeah, I think I was gonna say 5.5, which I'm assuming is like where your hesitation was. You know, it's a 1 mana card, something in your deck. But I like 5.5, all about the same.
Yep. Great defensive speed one. Formation Breaker. 1 and a green for a 2/1, and it has creatures with power less than this creature's power can't block it. And as long as you control a creature with a counter on it, this creature gets +1/+2. So it becomes a 3/3 if you have a counter somewhere. 2 mana 3/3 is pretty nice. Creatures with power less can't block it. That's also pretty nice. 2 mana 2/1 creatures with power less can't block it is like pretty mid. Not very strong, but I don't think it's going to be that hard to get a counter somewhere. Like, curve this into the black dragon that puts a counter on something and draws a card. You suddenly have a 4/4. So, yeah, like that's just a really good curve. I'm pretty happy with this card. I think I'd give it like uh it's better than an average common, I think, but not by a lot. I'd probably give it a 6. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. 6, better than common. Cool effect. Um, really happy to have like basically as many copies as I can get in my decks that have counters. Especially because you can put the counter on this thing, and it's just like crazy rate for a 2 drop. I'm almost like leaning towards a 5. I'm in a place where I think green feels like it's really strong. And like
Green's
I don't
good.
know,
We're so
borderline like
back,
the last,
baby.
like the rate, like the scale of the cards almost goes up a little bit because you're going to be able to be in green. The green cards just seem they've got good creatures, you know. I
Yeah,
love a good creature.
good stats. We love
All right,
stats.
we've got a new dog scout. This one is traveling
This art is so
botanist.
cute.
Botanist? Is it botanist or botanist? It's botanist, right?
Botanist. Yeah,
Okay,
botanist.
2 mana for a 2/3. Screwed our 1/1s. We're back to better stats. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may reveal it and put it in your hand. If you don't put the card in your hand, you may put it in your graveyard. So this is like the mechanic from Duskmourn, where you know, like going in your main phase 2 if it was tapped or something. When it attacks, you get to do this as a trigger, and then also with Harmonize. This card's a banger, I think. 2 mana, 2/3. It's got great stats, and then on top of that, it gets to like filter cards and get lands for free.
I will note that it isn't exactly the same as that card because that card was guaranteed to get a land, I believe. You just flipped until you saw a land, whereas this you just
Yeah, but
flip
in
the
that one
top.
needed to live through combat.
Right. And this is a 2/3 instead of a 2/2. And that other card was very good. I think this is like probably about as good. Like it's got a couple bumps in the places that like, you know, make it just kind of make up for the ability being slightly different. This card's great. Yeah, good stats for green. And then sometimes we'll just draw you a card. So,
Card's a banger. I'm gonna
yeah.
settle with a 4,
Oh,
but
I'm not that high. I think I'm probably at like a 5.5 for this. I
oh
don't
no
think
no,
you're going to prioritize it.
I was settling to a 4. I think this card is great. I mean,
Okay,
I guess
fair
it
enough.
depends on how many like harmonized mechanics are in your deck, but I think the card is a banger. And it's a dog. Look how cute. Oh, I love this set. All
It's very cute. Next, we
right, we
have
have an
Dragon
artifact.
Brood's. Yeah, one of the only artifacts we've seen so far. Dragon Brood's Relic, 1 and a green for an artifact. It has tap an untapped creature you control, add 1 mana of any color, so it's like a Springleaf Drum kind of, but it costs 2. And then it has 3 and Wooburg. Sacrifice this artifact. Create a 4/4 dragon creature token named Reliquary Dragon that's all colors. It has flying, lifelink, and when this token enters, it deals 3 damage to any target. Activate only as a sorcery. And obviously, notably, you don't have to um, tap it to do that, so you can use its ability to pay for the cost, which is pretty sweet. Um, so Nicole's giving this a 1, but what are we like all the rest of us giving it? I don't know. I would land somewhere on like six probably. I think this is kind of a sweet card. It's mostly the expensive spell, but yeah, I would land somewhere there. Nicole, would you
I
like
was
to give
actually
your
gonna put
one?
it closer to like a 5.5. I'm actually probably right around you. The thing is that this is not just a mana rock. You know, like when you get upside on these cards and they're not just mana rocks, or sorry, and they're just mana rocks, like, you're pretty happy typically playing a mana rock. Especially in formats with so many colors. As much as I love playing Wooburg, this set does look like it's going to be a 3-color set. Um, I'm sure I will draft 4-color sets to splash thing or decks to splash things, and I'm sure I will play Wooburg because the fixing is great and I love doing that kind of shit. But 8 mana is a lot. Um, like, you do get to 8 mana in games, but there are some pretty aggressive decks in this format, and your things are going to need to be able to stabilize, and stabilizing is also going to be a little bit difficult because this requires you to tap creatures to add for mana. And so, I mean, it's still fixing. I still like it. It still has a cool upside, but it's not like some of the premier kind of fixing sources we get from other things. The comparable thing I like try to think about when it comes to stuff like this is there was the card in OTJ that got a land, and then you could use the like additional cost, and it would make a creature that was like an XX. Except for this creature, like, it does bolt, but it's a little bit smaller, and like there's a fair amount of things that like bounce tokens and stuff. Um, and so like I rated that card a little bit higher, and so I think this card's definitely playable, but it's not quite what I want it to be. I want it to be better.
Understandable. Yeah. I think like the 8 mana effect is very strong because like you're gaining 3 life off of that bolt, and a 4/4 flying lifelink like really will stabilize you in most spots and probably
Pretty
will be
strong.
able to win a game.
It's
It
eight
can just get
mana.
removed, but yeah, and I do think that this is going to be a set where you can opportunistically splash a source or two of another color pretty easily, and then this kind of gets you the fifth color on its own. So I think it'll be pretty reachable, honestly, to like be activating this. Not in
This
every deck,
dragon does not have
certainly.
reach. It has flying.
Okay, you got. Take me away, officer. Um, but yeah, like I do think this card is going to be a lot more activatable, I guess, than you would think. It sort of only costs 7 and only needs 4 colors if you really squint. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm actually pretty high on this card, despite it being kind of clunky. I think it's like the combination of clunky ramp and slightly clunky but genuinely really powerful endgame if you can get Wooburg. And I don't think it'll be that hard to get Wooburg in this format. Yeah, I'm pretty high on it. So I'll agree with your grade of like what, 5.5, 6, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. We are going to go back to Harmony, synchronize our thoughts with synchronized charge. This is a 2 mana. I'm trying so hard. This is a 2 mana sorcery. Distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 creatures you control. Creatures you control with counters on them gain vigilance and trample until end of turn. And then it has harmonize. Um, there are effects like this that have happened previously in limited, and typically if there are synergies where counters matter, the card ends up being pretty good in those decks. Um, I think this card giving trample like adds a full point to it. We've talked a lot already about how the green creatures are really well statted. Um, you're playing a bunch of decks that have, that are in green. There's touching a bunch of things that like add +1/+1 counters and make big creatures and do all these things. And there's just not really a lot of ways for these other decks that have, smaller creatures that aren't as well statted to deal with trample. And then they have vigilance, so you don't even really have to deal with like a super big crackback or anything either. I think this card's really strong. I'm leaning towards a 4. I do think that is more because of how powerful I think green feels as a color. I think the effect truly is closer to like a 5. It's a card you want in these decks. But green feels a little stronger, so I think I'm going to value it a little bit higher in my drafts.
Yeah, I think the math tends to work out pretty well on this card. Like, I'm just imagining, let's say I have like a 4/4 and a 2/2, right? And I have double green. I can play this, put 2 counters on the 2/2, then tap the 4/4 and just spend a single green to give two more counters to the 2/2, and I'm attacking with a 6/6 vigilance trample that turn, and then I can just like untap with my 4/4 next turn. And then I might even like I only spent 3 mana. Maybe I can even double spell that turn. That's like very powerful. And the card's pretty flexible. Like you can spend one in a green on it, attack with both creatures, and then post combat you can cast it again just because you wanted to get the attack in, and then you harmonize after combat. Um, yeah, I think this card's good. I think I'm probably not quite as high on it as you, just because it's kind of like taking up a non-creature slot, and you really want a lot of creatures in most of your decks, and you need to fit in removal, you need to fit in other sweet cards you have. So, in terms of prioritizing it in the draft, I think I'm a little bit lower. I would maybe give it like a 6. I think it's definitely better than your average common, but I don't know if I'm going to be like taking this early and letting it shape where my draft goes. I think I more want to get it mid to late pack and be like, okay, this is the space I'm supposed to be in, if that makes sense.
I'm going to challenge you when you start drafting this set to like do a draft where you try taking this early and just playing green.
Okay, cool. I'm open
I
to
think
it.
this card, like,
I'll love a challenge.
it reads pretty well. I think it's going to be like even better than it reads. I don't know. I'm
Sweet.
excited about this
Okay.
card.
I do. It does have signs of a card that plays a lot better than it reads. I fully agree about that.
Yeah. All right. Now we have Attuned Hunter. I am this bear in the background. I've decided. This is a 3 mana 3/3 with trample. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard during your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So we've seen, a number of cards like this in previous sets. They're always good in the decks that they exist in, but you kind of want to get them a little bit later on average. It's like kind of a signal that the specific strategy you're playing for is open, right? Like we've talked about how the green cards are super strong and they're well statted, but maybe we don't all play all the ones that leave our graveyard. Maybe we're playing like a base blue-black deck because the table was fighting over green and we got a couple good green cards, and now all of a sudden this card gets a little bit more valuable. Type thing. I'm not trying to pick it early. I think I'm probably giving this card a 6. I think it will be very good in the decks where you care about things leaving your graveyard. Um, and Trample is a really nice piece of text on it, and it's fine stat-wise otherwise. And you can take it as a green card, like, kind of early, and if you don't get this effect, like, at worst, it's a 3 mana 3/3 Trample that can get counters from all these other synergies. So I think this card's definitely better than all the commons.
Yeah, I think I would say it's only like a little bit better than the commons. I might give it like a 6.5 or something. The 3 mana
Yeah,
3/3
that's fair too.
trample is pretty underrated or like underrate nowadays in limited. One counter on it and you're like totally happy, and then two counters you're like very happy. But it is a little bit difficult to do that effect. Like I don't think you're going to be doing it more than twice in most games. Um, yeah, it's just like a green stats creature. I just think the difference is it doesn't start out at great stats, and it like you need to earn it a little bit. So yeah, I think 6.5.
I like that.
Cool. Sage of the Fang, two and a green for a 2/2 human druid, but it's kind of a fake 2/2 because when it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So you're getting 3 mana 3/3 kind of worth of stats with some flexibility and some counter synergy. And then you can renew, three and a green, exile this card from your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on that creature.
Ooh.
Activate only as a sorcery. So sweet, really plays into the counter synergy spaces super well. This is exactly the card you want in that deck. It's still reasonable rate in other decks. Nothing super special, but like quite solid, I would say. 3/3 worth of stats with one of them being distributable anywhere you want is kind of sweet. This is a great curve with the black 1/2 flyer. That's like I think the ideal curve with it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
This card's really strong. I'm probably giving it a 5. I could even see
Yeah.
it going a little bit higher.
Yeah, I agree. I like a 5. Like 4.5 for the green buff is where I'm at.
Nice.
Um, I think card is definitely good. The uncommons in green seem like they really work well towards the synergies. I feel like a lot of people are going to be fighting over the green cards. All right, now we have Knockout Maneuver. This is 3 mana for a sorcery. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Then it deals damage equal to its power, so it's a bite. Put a counter and bite. Typically, these are a little tough because at sorcery speed, you can end up in a lot of positions where you like go to play it, and then you can kind of get got by one of a million combat tricks or removal spells. It doesn't seem like there's that much instant removal out of black. Um, but like I think I forget what the run over in this set is called. I think I like that bite more than I like this one. Sorcery really is just like kind of a downgrade. So where if I'm giving the other one like, I think like a 4 or something, I'm probably giving this one like a 5 or a 6. It's a removal spell in green. If you can't touch black, you're happy to have it as removal. But sorcery speed is definitely a downside.
Yeah, and even if you can touch black, then you're in green black, and it kind of is counter synergy stuff. Um, yeah, I like this card. I think Hunt the Weak is just like was a good card in Old Limited, and my boomer instincts are telling me this is just a full mana cheaper, which is really sweet. And it's obviously a bite, not a fight, which is also very sweet. But I think you're right. Like this can easily get blown out if you're forced to cast it into open mana, and it's only ever going to be like a removal spell plus a counter in like its best case scenario, which is good. It's definitely good, but it's not like winning you the game on its own. So I think this is a good card, but not a great card. So I'm comfortable with like your 5-ish.
I agree.
Cool. Rainveil Rejuvenator, 3 and a green for a 2/4. When this creature enters, you may mill 3 cards, and you can tap it to add an amount of green equal to this creature's power. Fascinating. So it's a 4 mana 2/4 that taps for 2 mana and mills you 3 at baseline. And then if you give it counters, it can tap for more. But like mostly we're just evaluating this on baseline, I think. It's going to be hard to both give it counters and want to use more than the 2 mana it generates. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know. What do we think about this one? It's not as clearly just a great rate card as the ones we've seen
Um,
before.
I think this is about common level. Like it'll be cool to put counters on it, and especially with all the renew effects and harmonize and stuff, there is a lot of mana sinks where having like one big mana dork might be threatening enough that it like requires removal. Maybe slightly above the commons just because the mill 3 is a benefit, it seems like in these decks. So if I was going to give it a 7, maybe like a 6.5. But I don't think it's a card that we're rating super highly.
I agree. I even think it might even be slightly below the commons, just because 4 mana 2/4 is really not a great body, and it might be hard to use the mana. Like I don't think green, at least from what we've seen, goes super big with how much mana it's spending. It kind of just casts
I
its
don't agree with
creatures,
that.
and I don't know.
It has
Like
all the renew effects. It has all the harmonize effects, and then there's like
yeah,
just some big bodies. Like if you play this on turn 4, then on turn 5 you have 5 mana plus this taps for 2. You can play like a 4 drop and a 3 drop or something. Um, or you can like use something else for harmonize. And I think it's definitely above the commons in my head. In fact, 2 mana of acceleration is pretty good, and sometimes it's gonna get even bigger than that. Um, I think 6.5. I'm almost leaning 6.
okay.
I do
I
like
think
it.
I'll give it a 7. I think I'm I'm halfway between. It might be better than most of the commons, and it might be very slightly worse. So I think I'm just gonna rate it like a normal common. But I
Okay.
get your perspective. It's valid.
Encroaching Dragon Storm. This is a 4 mana enchantment. When this enchantment enters, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, tapped, and shuffle. When a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand.
Hmm.
I like having one of these in my deck. It our green. It looks like it's beneficial to ramp. We're gonna have um lots of ways to sink our mana. It just seems like the format has a lot of ways to use your mana, and so this is both fixing and ramp. And then sometimes you get to play it twice, and if you play it a second time, you start really getting all of the lands out of your deck and drawing only gas, which is typically the benefit of these cards. I don't rate these like ever super highly. I'm probably giving it like a 6.
I think I'm lower on it just because I don't think any other deck is really going to want this, and so I just don't think I'm going to need to like take it very highly at all. I will play it in some green decks, and I won't play it in others. So I'm probably on like an 8, but I really like the card and like where it fits into the format, and it gives me the tools to kind of do things that I might want to do sometimes. That's kind of where
You
I'm
just like stabbed me directly in my heart by saying 8. You couldn't have said 7?
at. No, I don't think so. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of decks where you're just like, no, I don't want
Criminal.
that.
It
Next up.
enables playing all of your broken
So
multicolor cards.
we're
It's
gonna
so
we're gonna
good.
keep on this. Yeah, no, I mean, like, again, I think in certain decks it will be a thing you actively want, but 4 mana to not affect the board and just to ramp is like no longer really something that you can do a lot in limited. You need to follow up with some really, really like good cards. And so if you're a deck
Everything
full
here,
of broken 3 color cards, then sure, I want it. But like I don't always want it if I'm just like
yeah, I
a
think everything
green
you're
deck.
saying is true of normal sets. Like that's how I value this card in the average standard set. But in a set that's designed to be multicolor, and like we've talked about how so many of the multicolor, like the signposts and this stuff, they work well together and they're just like super high power level and super pushed. And I think in sets like that, you should value the fixing a little bit higher. And you just like find ways to stabilize, and then there is no deck that goes better over the top than you do.
Okay, yeah, I can see it. I might be wrong. I think it
I
is
haven't read the
definitely correct for
multicolor
you to
card yet,
draft it
though.
as a 6. No, but you're right. Like the multicolor cards, we're going to get to them, and we haven't gotten to them, so our thinking is a little bit biased against like wanting fixing. I try to correct for that, but like it can be hard to. Like you really are going to want to play these multicolor cards. I do think there might be a thing where like they're incentivizing you to play like a specific lane of multicolor, like a 3 color lane.
Hmm.
And this is like not great in just a 3 color deck, but yeah, I totally agree, Nicole, that you should draft this as a 6.
Thank you. That's all I
Of
needed.
course.
It's validation.
Anytime. Okay, I'm reading this one, I think.
Yeah.
Right of Renewal, 3 and a green for a sorcery. Return up to 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Target player shuffles up to 4 target cards from their graveyard into their library. Exile Right of Renewal. Oh, that's so sad. They like
They didn't
are
want
making
us to
Sam
not
Black
mill.
sad by, adding that exile text. Um, this is a very specific card that you're going to want in a very specific role that just says, like, I don't lose a long game. And sometimes you'll want that in your main deck if your deck is really good at creating long games and has defensive speed, has a couple powerful cards, but those cards might get removed and you might really struggle to win the game after that. Or if you end up in a really grindy matchup post sideboard and you want to bring this in, I think very clearly, like, those are the places where you want to use this. And I think most of the time, you don't want to put this in your deck by default. So I would probably say, in terms of our grading scale, this is like a 9. You probably want to try to pick one up, but you don't ever need to. And yeah, like that's kind of where I'm picking it. I don't know if you have
They
any
just make
different
better
thoughts.
value cards nowadays. We just
Yeah.
talked about a 4 mana spell that got 2 lands and fixed and did all of this and argued whether or not it was like above a 7. So for this to be a 4 mana sorcery that just puts things in your hand, it's just really like they make better value cards in Magic now. There are better ways to use your mana than to spend 4 mana on something like this. And if your deck was really churning through the graveyard and it did not have this exile text, then maybe you could have an argument of like, oh well, I can prevent my deck from decking, so it's
By
it's
having
worth
2 of
it. But
them.
with
Yeah,
the
it's
exile
very
text, I
good.
just don't even see a reason I would want to play this card.
Yeah, I agree. You'll very much know it when you want it, and you shouldn't want it most of the time.
All right, on to our last green card. Spirited Vanguard.
It is
Inspirited
inspirited,
Vanguard.
which is so confusing. It like makes you think you're mispronouncing it, but you're not.
5 mana 3/2. Whenever this creature enters or attacks, it endures 2. So it gets either 2 counters or makes a 2/2 spirit. I think I'm not excited about this card. I like my big green things. And this is not a particularly, I guess. Oh, it enters as a 5/4 if you
Yeah, it's a
wanted
seven
to.
six attacker.
Oh no,
That's
maybe
big.
maybe this card kind of pops. Maybe I like
I
this
think
card.
it does. Like when it enters, you're probably going to want to make it a 5/4, and then it kind of just depends on whether they have a good block or not, whether you're going to make it like a 7/6 or just start churning out 2/2s. But like this is sort of just, yeah, I mean, it's strictly better than 5 mana 5/4 attacks make a 2/2, which is like that card's good. I think it's not
Yeah, no, I
great,
think
but
it's
it's
good.
good.
I
Yeah,
think I want to give this like a 5, just because it's a 5 mana spell, and there's lots of like expensive things to do. So you can possibly find something better than this at 5 mana. Um, but I think it's good. Good rate.
totally agree. Yep, I think I'd put it at a 5. 5 drop, 5 rating, 5/4, perfect.
All fives. All right, I finished recording this. I'm gonna edit this.